Hi, you guys. My name is Cassidy Perry, and I'm actually so excited to be starting this podcast. And actually, I had a really funny story. How this started was that just about a week ago, I was in the parking lot after church, and one of the leaders, Aaron, a friend of mine, he came out and was like, Cassidy, have you ever thought about starting a podcast? And I was like, actually, yes. Oh my gosh, all week I've been thinking about how I want to do something podcast like, where I can kind of use it as a journal sort of thing, where I talk about the revelations I've been having after I go through some sort of hardship or struggle, and then I'm like, wow, that all makes sense because I see how like God is using this for the greater. And so this is going to be a podcast, a faith-based podcast, where I talk about all things Jesus and hopefully occasionally have guests on to talk with me. And I thought, what better way to start this podcast off than to share my testimony? So that's what I'm going to do today. This will probably be short and sweet, but I thought that this would be the perfect way for you guys to get to know me a little bit. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I grew up in actually a non-Christian home, but with the most supportive, best parents, a very strong foundation. And my freshman year is the first time I went to youth group. Sort of, there was not like a lot of stuff that went into this. I was just kind of like, I want to go to youth group, sort of out of the blue. And my mom was able to take me one time, and yeah, I came to this youth group. This is Hope Church, Tradewinds SoCal, and the youth group was in this building, and I came here, and the people were so genuine and so sweet and so welcoming, and it was something that I had never experienced before, was this like genuineness and this like want. They like had this desire to like know more and to get to know me, and it was just this intentional relationship that they built from the get-go. It was just a couple of them, specifically Savannah and both Savannahs, two of the sweetest people. And that was 100% how I experienced the love of Jesus. It wasn't the worship, it wasn't the message that I like specifically remember from that first youth group of being here. It was completely the people, where I was like, wow, I want to be like this. I want to make people feel this way. Was exactly how I felt when they made me feel like that, so welcomed and included, and like the sense of community. And that's what made me want to come back the next week. So I came back the next week, and the same thing happened. It was just more people, more friends. It was just like immediately the second week I just felt like a part of a community because of the way that I was just being treated, and I just could tell that they like genuinely wanted to like know more, and like were like, I just felt so like seen and heard, and that wasn't something that I felt in like at school or in a sport. It was different because people like it felt like they actually cared, whereas a lot of other places my relationships felt more surface level, but they kind of immediately got into like the deeper parts, and it was just so intentional. And that was definitely how I first experienced the love of Jesus, and that like was completely life-changing just from the first month of being here at youth group. But further on, a couple months later, I got to go to winter camp, which is this camp up at Old Oak Ranch in Sonora, California. And when I got there, I was amazed because people were so passionate and so on fire for God that it was just this sense of community that I immediately felt upon being there. And it was the kind of thing that just the people from my youth group who I went up there with and the people who were there, I became such fast and such close friends, because being up at camp is such like an intimate and such a just relationship bonding like place, because it's like all the deepest parts, like all the hardships kind of get brought out and put into the light, and then you just kind of work through all of that, and it's just this place where like amazing things happen, like breakthroughs are just happening every second up at camp, and you specifically feel it there. And that's where I accepted Jesus into my life, because I was like, wow, these people who are all so passionate and so on fire for God, I was like, I want that, because it's such a strong community, And yeah, I accepted Jesus into my life because I was just like, whoa, I want that. I want that joy. I want that peace. I want that feeling. And I came back down from camp with, I felt like I could just like go forward with with my life with like this new sense of peace, because it took away this like worry or anxiety that I'd felt. This was my freshman year, so this like anxiety about sort of a new chapter in my life that I was like going into, this new chapter of high school. And kind of, I feel like going up to camp, everything gets made more simple because you kind of realize you kind of put your priorities in place, or at least that's what I did being up there. Was I was like, oh, this like hardship that I'm kind of been going through, it's like nothing compared to what Jesus went through, or this is nothing compared to what these other people are going through. And things were made a lot more simple in my mind. And going back down the mountaintop of being at camp, I had built such close relationships with a couple of the people who I had went up with, and I was like, wow, this could only be because of this like close tightness we have, because we share in common. We have in common Jesus, and that's what everyone has in common going up there. So it was just this sense of community that's what I was kind of chasing after. And it was so refreshing to have this new sort of family that I was like a part of, and still to this day that is the only thing, that's one of the only things that I like just crave to be a part of, is just community. Like I just want that close family and that close community. And so that was so special. And I came back down here and was so excited about, I was just had this new excitement about my new faith. And it was great, but it also, I got very religious about it and not relationship, which is what I learned later was the healthy way of faith, or of religion, I guess, is relationship. And what I mean when I say religion is I had kind of come down with like, okay, now that I have this new belief, this new faith, now I need to not cuss. I need to not watch rated R movies. I need to do XYZ to be like a good person, a good Christian, because this is what I think I need to do to be righteous. And that was completely not the way to be looking at it, because that didn't just go to hurting myself and to suppressing myself, but I started looking down upon others when I'd be like, oh, well, so-and-so is speaking poorly, or so-and-so is vaping, and so-and-so, like, just in my head, I'd look down upon others like that. And it was very much not the way that we're called into talking about people or thinking about people in a low sense. And so I had to learn over time that there's a big difference between religion versus relationship. And religion, I guess I had always had the stereotypical view of religion, how I feel like maybe a lot of people view religion, of like the Bible being like a book of rules that need to be followed, and if you don't follow them, then you're not a good person and you can't get into heaven, or XYZ. And that was something that definitely took me a while to realize, that it wasn't me needing to put the pressure on myself to try not to cuss, to try not to do, to try not to lie, to try not to be rude to other people. It was something that naturally came through spending time with God and through being in His Word. And it's so refreshing and takes so much anxiety and just weight off your shoulders when you can just have trust in God and cast those anxieties off of yourself and onto Him, and just be like trusting and trusting. That's the big word. But that was so freeing. And after I walk through seasons of life, I come to these new realizations of exactly why I needed to go through a certain season in order to learn a lesson. And that was one of the things. And another one was realizing that, let me see here. Oh, prayer. I completely thought that by accepting Jesus into my life, that prayer was going to happen, that things like being able to hear God's voice, not audibly hear God's voice, but I thought that I would know what God was leading me into right away just by accepting Jesus into my life. I was like, oh, well, that will mean that I'll just have this change of heart or change inside me that will just make me be able to notice all these other things. And that was also something that I thought would just happen overnight and not over time through building a relationship. And I asked my youth pastor, Justin, I was like, how will I know what God's voice is? How will I know when I'm hearing God's voice as compared to it being the enemy's voice or my own voice? Like, how I know that it's God leading me into that? And he explained it to me so well, and it's always stuck with me. And he had asked me, he's like, Cassidy, if you heard my voice compared to someone else's voice and you couldn't see me and you just heard my voice, would you know it was me compared to another person's voice? And I was like, well, yeah, of course I would. He's like, well, you would only know that because you've spent time with me and you've spent time being around me and knowing the kinds of things I would say, and you know what kinds of things I wouldn't say and what I wouldn't want. And he said, similarly to God, you would only start to realize and recognize what God's voice is and what God is leading you into through spending time with him, through spending time in his word. And that's really kind of what kicked off the start of my really relationship with God. Was I was like, oh, I need to intentionally, kind of paralleling back to what I had said in the beginning of the video, was I needed to be intentional with my relationship with God and start to really spend time with him and get to know who he was and get to know the character of God before I was able to, for my actions to follow that. And so that was my main thing. I guess my main takeaway, or your main takeaway from this video, could be that build intentional relationships with people and with God, because everything sort of flows from that. And that has been the biggest part of my life, was being intentional and genuine and just having faith and having trust. And yeah, so anyways, I'm so excited. I hope that you had something to take away from that, and I'd love to just close out in prayer. So Jesus, I just thank you so much for this opportunity to make this video today, God. I just thank you that I had this time to reflect and to remember just what you've done in my life and how far you've taken me. And I just pray that this will reach someone today, that this will encourage someone, and that they would be able to go off and encourage others through this. God, just thank you so much. In your name we pray. Amen. Thank you so much, guys. That was so exciting. I hope that that made sense and that you guys could relate with that. But yeah, thank you.